Hi, everyone, and welcome to WonderCon at Home. My name is Ivan Salazar, and I am the Senior Marketing Director at Kodansha USA. If you're in this panel, then you must know what you're here for. This is So You Want to Be a Manga Editor. We're very fortunate to have editors not only from Japan, but also from the US. And so to give them the most time to introduce themselves and tell us about what they do, let's start by asking, who are these wonderful editors? Who are these panelists? And what knowledge are they going to impart with us? So if you could please introduce yourselves, where you are an editor, and one of your favorite series you've worked on. That would tell us a lot about you. Tiff, would you like to go first?
Yes, Ivan, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and it is such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Hello, everyone. My name is Tiff Ferentini. I am a manga editor at Kodansha Comics, and I have quite a lot of favorite manga series that I'm working on right now, but some of my favorites include Attack on Titan, Chobits 20th Anniversary Edition, Night of the Ice, and Boys Run the Riot, which will be coming out later this year.
And Nate, would you like to tell us about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Nate Gallant. I'm also an editor at Kodansha Comics. I have a lot of favorites of the stuff that I edit and the stuff that we do, but some of them include Saint Young Men, Sayuki, and Orient, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit today.
And Takuma-san, if you could please let us know what it is you edit and introduce yourself.
はい、はじめまして、講談社週刊少年マガジン編集部のたくまと言います。会社に入って今が15年目です。で、漫画の編集者としては今が11年目となります。で、週刊少年マガジン編集部で、多くの作品を担当していて、今アメリカで発売されているものですと、オリエントと、ダイヤのエースという漫画を担当しています。好きな漫画、思い出のある作品は、過去に、アメリカで出てないみたいなんですけど、自分が担当していた悪魔ゲームっていう頭脳バトルの漫画があって、それは自分が初めて企画段階から関わった作品ということもあって、すごく思い入れがあります。
Tsuchiyaさん、please, if you could let us know about yourself.
Hi everyone. My name is Natsuki Tsuchiya, and すいません、日本語で話します。私はキスっていうこの女性向けの漫画雑誌の編集者をしています。で、思い入れのある作品はこの東京タラレバガールズです。これはすごい日本でもドラマ化したりとかした作品なので、いろいろと関わらせていただきました。よろしくお願いします。
Well, thank you very much for everybody for telling us a little bit about yourself. Again, we're in the very fortunate position to be able to get a little bit of information in terms of what editing is like, what manga editing is like specifically, both here in the US and in Japan. So I wanted to ask a little bit about what a day of editing manga is like for each of the editors. So Tsuchiya-san, if you could please tell us what it is like a full day of editing manga for you.
基本的には漫画を毎日ずっと作り続けてるという感じでして、でなんか仕事の種類としては大きく打ち合わせとこうネームチェックっていうか、その作品のベースが大丈夫かっていうことと、あと入稿考慮というか原稿を仕上げていくみたいな作業に分かれている感じです。で、打ち合わせはその漫画家さんと会って、次のお話どうしようとか、新しいキャラクターどうしようみたいな感じでこう内容を詰めていくっていうのはなんかこういう感じになってて、打ち合わせの後に漫画家さんが出してくださるやつで、 そんな感じでチェックしていって、この内容が大丈夫かなっていうのを確認していきます。でそれがこういう感じで原稿にそれをお預かりして、セリフを入れたりとかして最終チェックをしてこう印刷していく感じです。
That's amazing. Like I love being able to see the process of manga as it's made. I only have a small bit of knowledge from other manga that I've read about making manga. But anyways, Takuma-san, I understand that you work in a different, a completely different magazine. So is some of what Tsuchiya-san, some of the process for her, is it the same for you or are there differences?
そうですね。大体同じだと思うんですけど、すごく大枠のところ、要は打ち合わせをして、ネームチェックをして、さっき話したここに漫画家さんが手書きで書いた文字を書体を決めたりとかっていうことは変わらないです。なんかちょっと補足をするとしたら、漫画編集者の仕事って何ですかって本当によく聞かれるんですね。その時に僕は答えるのが、実際に漫画家さんがペンを握って原稿を書くっていう仕事以外の全部にちょっとずつ関わるっていう説明をよくしてます。まだ形にもなってない状態から物語を考えるところから、さっき言ったネームチェックとか考慮作業とかして、あとはその後に、じゃあ世の中に出た時にそれをどうやって宣伝するかとか、アニメとかなった時に、じゃあアニメの制作の人たちと脚本を一緒に考えたりとか、グッズになった時にグッズのクオリティのチェックをしたりとかっていうことに、なんかいろんな人と関わりながら原稿を書く以外の全部にちょっとずつ携わってるっていうのが僕たちの仕事のイメージだと思います。
That is really amazing then, the level of work that you editors in Japan do to help guide the story, and it's very neat in the way that both you, the company, and the creators work together to make sure to promote these books. Now from the US side, Nate and Tiff, I imagine your jobs are a little bit different from what our editors in Japan are doing. Could you walk us through what your days are like as a manga editor for Penguin Random House?
So because depending on our editorial schedules, editors can work on anywhere between sometimes 3 to 5 manga series a month. Depending on how many series I'm working on at the same time, I might be working on several different manga at the same time, just different stages of it. But for example, some of the editorial work that I focus on, for example, if I just assigned a new manga series and I got the script in from the translator, then that means I'm editing a Word document, which is basically a typed up script of the manga, broken down line by line, panel by panel of what character is saying what. It also notes any footnotes that there may be in the book. Or also any sound effects that also might be in the book. So when I'm editing a script, I will check it against the Japanese tankobon to ensure that the translation is accurate. And I'll also go line by line, making any necessary changes, and also leaving comments in order to give feedback to the translator. Or if we're a little further in the editorial process and I've received a lettered pass from a letterer, then I'm working at a PDF where it has the original Japanese artwork with the translated English text placed in it. So then I'm reading the individual manga pages as they would appear in the printed book. And in addition to doing another thorough check on the language to ensure that the translation is accurate, I will also look for any potential issues that might come up with the art. For example, if the art isn't extending all the way to the page, or if there's any typographical errors, or if anything else needs to be fixed. And in addition to that, there's also a lot of work that editors do not in the nooks and crannies of the book. So for example, sometimes we may work on special projects such as omnibus or anniversary editions of books, or box sets. And those are some of my favorite assignments to work on because I can get a little creative. For example, we have a lovely set of Attack on Titan box sets. And that was probably one of my favorite projects to work on because for that, I got to pick the art that we used to design the box itself with bonus items that we decided to include, which can range anywhere between stickers to a poster, or for the Attack on Titan box sets, we have short story booklets, which have never been published in English anywhere else. So that is a great bonus item for that. So I love being able to do projects where I get to be a little bit more creative. And then sometimes editors will take care of smaller editorial tasks. So this could be anywhere between sending emails to freelancers and letterers, writing cover copy. So when you look at the back of a book and there's copy on the back of it, typically the editor will write that. And that is just several of the various tasks that editors will do. And sometimes we will also be asked to review potential titles for licensing. And that is probably another one of my favorite parts of being a manga editor, because I get to read manga that I may not have read otherwise. I get to stay on top of new manga that's coming out in Japan. And I really get to think about what would a English audience like to see, what new manga is out there that folks are talking about and want to see over here, or what's really popular that people would want to read more of. So that is another favorite part of some of the things we get to work on. And I will now pass it over to you, Nate.
Well, you covered a lot of ground of what we do, Tiff, but maybe if I can zoom out a little bit and answer Takuma-san's question about what an editor in the context of like our job of localization does in general. It sort of, for me, on a daily basis involves like two major things. The first, making sure that we get a finished product from Japan, basically, which we have to localize. And so that involves, on the one hand, making sure that the book as it was produced in Japan is accurately represented to English-speaking audiences. And so, like Tiff was saying, that involves checking the translation script and making sure that, everything down to the fonts that we use or the way that the sound effects are relettered into the book look exactly like and reproduce the experience of reading it in Japanese. And so there's a lot that goes into matching and making sure that things are accurate. And, sort of like, doing our best to get into the heads of the manga creators and editors in Japan and make sure that we're doing right by all of the intentions that were put into the book in the first place. And so I know that, Tiff and I and everyone else on the editorial team put a lot of time into thinking about that and do our best to read these things as closely as the editors in Japan are doing and try to get inside of them. And then the other thing is to think about how best to present these things to English-speaking audiences, not necessarily to change things, but in what ways that context needs to be added, or like packaging or covers and stuff need to be changed to make things as accessible as possible, and to think about cultural differences and other kinds of things that may need to be translated or thought about differently when they come to North American audiences. And, a big part of this is, say, creating translation notes or thinking about, issues of sensitivity or different other issues that, might not require some context in the Japanese audience, whether because they're already understood or they're just talked about in a different way, and thinking about what kind of scaffolding needs to go around them. And so, we will, spend a lot of time thinking and talking as a team about the best ways to present some things to English-speaking audiences. And yeah, I think the biggest thing that at least I do on a daily basis in that is working with translators to create and refine translation notes. Saint Young Men and Orient are two big examples of that because they're, they involve historical knowledge that might be pretty common in Japan, but may not be totally obvious to a reader in North America. And so making sure that the readers have all the information that they need to access the book in the form that we have done our best to reproduce it is also an important part of my job. That's sort of maybe a big picture take on kind of what our daily activities are.
And so we've gotten a really inside look on what editors do in Japan, what editors do in the US, and bring some of the manga created in Japan to the US audience. And another fortunate thing we have about having both Japanese and American editors is that we have both the editor for Orient from both the Japan side as well as the US side. So I wanted to ask a little bit about that as just a focusing point. Since we've already talked about timelines and already talked about what the editor's role is in creating or helping create these stories, I wanted to ask, in terms of first looking at what stories, what manga stories are being pitched and which ones will be approved to go into publishing, what is the editor's role in looking at the different, submissions that come in, and how do you know which one is suitable for the magazine that will be printed? Like, for in this case, Orient. Like, how did you know, looking at the creator's submission, that was like, this would be a great one to, start publishing?
はい、オリエントに限らず、そうですね、一般的な話なんで最初になっちゃうんですけど、基本的な漫画の連載を始める始めないっていうのは編集長が決めるんですね。さっき土屋さんが見せてたネームっていう、この物語の流れが大体わかるものっていうのを、大体1話から3話分ぐらい作って、それを編集長に見せて、編集長が面白いって言ってくれたら、これは連載にしようって言ってくれたら連載始まるっていうことになってます。それはほぼ全ての作家さんに対して、そういうルールで、マガジンの場合はやらせてもらっているっていうのがまず前提としてあって、で、その上で、オリエントに関しては、ですね、どういうふうに生まれたかですよね。一番、そうですね、最初に、大高先生にお声掛けをして、で、マガジンで書きませんかっていうことをオファーをして、で、それでお会いして、こういう漫画を書いてほしい。で、大高先生はじゃあ、前にも過去にも連載がある作家さんなので、なんとなくこういうの書いてみたいって、ぼやっとしたイメージがお互いにあって、で、すごく覚えてるのが、もう一人実は若い編集者がいて、3人でやってるんですけど、3人ですっごく長い雑談をしてた記憶があります。それは例えば雑談と打ち合わせの中間というような、次何書きましょうかっていう話をよくしてて、で、例えば僕は最初から和風ファンタジーを、前の作品が洋風のファンタジーだったんで、今回は和風のファンタジーを書いてほしいとは思っていて、で、大高先生もぼやっと多分ファンタジーを書きたいっていう思いはあったんですけど、じゃあどういうファンタジーにしようかってなった時に、例えばじゃあ雑談の中でチームスポーツっていいよねとか、サッカーとか野球とか楽しいよねとか、そういう話になって、で、僕とか、もう一人の担当もチームスポーツを経験したこともあって、サッカーっていうのはこういう楽しみがあるんだとか、なんかこういう時に悔しかったり、こういう時に嬉しかったりするんですよねとかってそういう話をしてて、例えばそういうところから、じゃあ武士が集まる武士団、侍が集まる武士団が鬼と戦う話にしようとか、じゃあチームをこことかっていう風にして、だんだん物語が絞り込まれていって、で、この作品のこの輪郭が生まれたというか、で、あとは個別で1話、2話、3話、主人公にこういうことをさせようとか、敵をこういう風にしようとかっていう個別の話を作っていったんですけど、一番最初はなんかすごく、なんでしょう、作家さんも編集者も なんか自分たちのことをすごく喋った記憶があります。なんか自分がどういう人間で、どういうことを今まで感じながら生きてきたかみたいなのをとっても長く話した記憶があります。
That's really cool. Like to start a story and a series based on just conversations. I often had this idea that regardless of what a manga story is like, there is a strong emotional core where it's all about the feelings of the characters and their journey, and so it makes it so that the audience really follows these characters because we want to see them succeed, like even if they fail. So the fact that these stories are born from just conversations about, you know, where are you in your life, what are you interested in, what are some things you want to do, like that is very fascinating, because I think then that sort of strong work with the emotions of the editorial staff and the creator combine to sort of like create this like story idea that then grows from that. Like I think that's a very neat collaborative process. And I guess from the US side, Nate, you also handle a lot of, you know, localization of bringing Orient, and I see that because it started from such a deeply Japanese place of, you know, Bushi and Oni. You know, what are some of the challenges that you face, like sort of bringing that story over, knowing the kind of things that anime and manga fans are interested in, and like, what was your sort of guiding light towards making sure that, you know, audiences in the US like really resonated?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the challenge came from the fact that it's, you know, it's a historical piece. It's like a jidaigeki, like a period piece set in an alternate version of kind of like early modern samurai culture, Japan. And the kind of difficulty is not just that it presents all of this historical and cultural information, but that a lot of it is like a play on those tropes. You see a lot of things that on the one hand might just be like a, you know, like a bakemono, like a monster, or like something that might look like a yokai, like a ghost or something like that. But it's actually a little bit different because it's a work of fantasy. It's in the vein of kind of what Otaka Sensei has done in the past. And so kind of like maintaining its character as that kind of historical piece, but also making the way that it plays on those tropes accessible to English audiences was the biggest challenge there. Because, you know, it has lots of samurai, but there's also like motorcycles and stuff like that. So it needs to tread a very fine line. And maybe the best example of this is the way that all of these supernatural beings are brought into the story. So like the pantheon of different kinds of strange supernatural beings that you can encounter in Japanese folklore is there's a multitude more, and they're very different from the ones that kind of like we might think of as just like ghosts or something like that in a lot of the kind of like in a lot of the English language context that we think of. And so, you know, it's always kind of a challenge to bring these things into English, but specifically because this isn't just presenting these new ideas to English audiences, it's playing with them. There is kind of a difficulty in there. And so I work with the translators and some of the other folks on the team to try to really craft the language of this to reflect a world that is both accessible and reflects, you know, these samurai tropes. So for instance, the central antagonists, there's these two kind of like teenage like Bushi in training, samurai in training, who are, you know, vying to become the strongest, greatest band of samurai of all time. And the main adversary that they're fighting is, in Japanese, it's Kishin. And so it's this kind of like ambivalent word that mostly means demon, but in some contexts is just like kind of a divinity that you don't really know what it's about. It's a little mysterious. so it's not quite demon or devil, but it's not also quite God. And so, there's lots of different solutions to this, but the one that we chose, which I think kind of reflects the complexity of this work, and trying to respect where it's coming from and how we're trying to make it accessible, is to actually just use different words. And so there's times when people are not sure what these things are. And so we use kind of like gods to try to play off the sense of false gods and the whole trope of kind of putting your faith in things that you maybe shouldn't put your faith into, not to spoil too much. But then for the people who kind of like know the truth about them, as you'll kind of see if you read, they refer to them as like demons or demon gods. And I promise that doesn't give away too much. That's really only the beginning of the action in Orient. But yeah, so like that was kind of one way of like trying to work with existing ideas about the way that we might think about like gods and demons or whatever in an English language context or a North American context, but also try to be faithful to what is going on in the book and in the version that we received. Yeah, I hope that kind of answers, maybe just like, it's different for every book and for every problem, but that's at least the way that we tackled this specific localization problem. So I got this a little while ago. This is the English language edition. See some of the art is really cool. There's some great scenes, samurai riding motorcycles. And yeah, there's the gods are also, the Kishin, the demons or gods are also very kind of like scary. There's like these kind of like minor ones here, which are fun. Sometimes the gods, they look like Buddhas, or they look like weird sci-fi monsters, or they look like kaiju. And so there's a lot of different things that are a lot of different imageries that are being drawn on, which is one of the really fun things about the series, but was also part of the challenge of translating it. So just another thing to mention. But yeah, here's the book. It's cool.
Yeah, very cool. And so we've heard from Takuma-san about how editorial is a bit more of a collaborative process with the creators. Tsuchiya-san, I wanted to ask, you obviously work on different stories, more shojo, more romance. For a story like Perfect World, how did your team work with Aruga-sensei to really craft the story? Whereas, Orient might be something like, battles and demons and a samurai. I imagine shoujo is a much more emotional story process. So how did you work with the creator to craft the story for A Perfect World?
ですね、パーフェクトワールドはこれですね。まず編集部で会議があって、恋愛の漫画って結構パターンが重要なので、これは障害のあるというか壁のある恋っていうようなテーマで編集部でまず会議を持ったという経緯があったと聞いています。で、その中でじゃあ自分がハンディキャップのある人と恋愛するっていうのはどういうことなんだろうというところまでが会議で多分編集部で話し合われて、で、アルガ先生にちょっと書いてそのいう内容で取り組んでいただきたいっていう感じでオファーしたというようなのがざっとした多分企画成立の経緯ですね。で、やっぱり車椅子とかを書くっていうのは多分すごい大変なことだと思うので、ちょっと私これ担当じゃないので具体的に自分が動いたわけじゃないんですが、同僚がやっているのを見ていた感じとしてはやっぱりすごい車椅子で生活されている方にインタビュー取材しに行ったりとか、あとこれ建築士の方が モデルなので、その建築事務所のところに取材しに行ったりとか、すごくいろんなところに足を運んで、お話を聞いたのを参考にこうお話に入れ込んでいるのだと思います。
Gotcha. That sounds really cool. I do know that in the States for any title that sort of deals with sensitive topics like that, like having sensitivity readers or interview people is something that's become more commonplace now. And I'm very happy to hear that, for something like this in Manga Japan, like there is also a sort of process to make sure to interview people to try to get the closest to real life experience to be able to tell these kinds of stories. Tiff, I know that you also work on the States side for Perfect World. And though I know that part of bringing manga over to the States is a kind of localization, but I understand that for something like this, this is also another topic that's very sensitive in the United States. So I'm assuming on top of the work that Tsuchiya-san and her team did in Japan, there's also some work that has to be done here in the United States. Could you let us know a little bit of the challenges and things that you faced while editing A Perfect World?
Sure. So I love hearing about the Japanese editorial process side because you really kind of get to rewind back and see all of kind of the care and sensitivity that the author put in while creating this manga for like the original release. And I love also talking about kind of the additional care and steps that we take for the English language edition. So one thing that I'm so thankful for Perfect World is that we were able to have a authenticity reader read this series. And because one of the main plot points, not to spoil anything for Perfect World, is the ongoing relationship between the two main characters and the various challenges that they face as their relationship kind of changes and develops throughout the years. It's not a simple, shojo josei trope of will they, won't they. It's about them growing as not only a couple, but also as individuals trying to learn and understand one another. So I'm so thankful that we were able to have a sensitivity reader on board to kind of just run by any concerns that we had with language being used. For example, I recall the first draft of Perfect World, whenever it was referring to characters who used a wheelchair, the original translation drafts had the term translated as, oh, that person's in a wheelchair. However, to stray away from in and with the negative connotation of implying that the person who uses the wheelchair is in it and that, they're confined to it and the negative kind of connotations that come with that word. We changed that for the release to read this person uses a wheelchair. Another example of how we kind of changed the language to make it, more appropriate is a lot of the characters who happen to be wheelchair users in the series began using a wheelchair after they had an accident or an illness that led to them using it. So the characters may refer to that time in their life as when I became disabled. But then after that point in the story, the word disabled wouldn't be used to describe them. They would say, I have a disability. So I'm so thankful that we were able to kind of take the time and slow down and really think about how the implications and how the meanings of some words came across, and also run it by the sensitivity reader. And that was a series where it was really a collaborative effort because at that point I would do several rounds of edits before it got to the sensitivity reader. And in a lot of my emails, I would say, by the way, these are several scenes where I've made these changes because this is what is being implied in the scene. Can you let me know if that is coming across? Or is there anything that you would recommend for me to make that clearer? For example, because the characters deal with a lot of adversity and there's a lot of characters who are ignorant and do not know how to speak to them properly. Sometimes there are scenes where a character will say something that is inappropriate because it's clear in the original scene that they are ignorant and that they do not know better. It was just a really great opportunity being able to run that by someone else who could say, yes, this is an appropriate way to approach this, or you should change this to make it better for that audience.
No, that's really cool. Like, I understand that there's already the issue of some language and cultural barriers that happen when bringing over manga to the United States. But the fact that you're able to not only look at the story that's brought over, but then go even further in terms of the examination of like the localization here in the United States. Will this offend anybody? Will this take anyone out of the story? Or are there ways to present these stories in a way that'll enrich the reader or educate the reader and like help them understand more about the people that are being depicted in these stories? It's amazing the additional steps that you're able to take to really make this like as good of an experience for English language readers to be able to still enjoy this story. So very cool. And I guess, I know that a lot of the editors in Japan are also creators themselves sometimes, especially in Kodansha. So I wanted to ask for both Takuma-san and Tsuchiya-san, do you have tips as editors who see these stories, like how to become a manga creator? What are some things that these creators might want to focus on to make sure that their name is as good as possible to present to editors such as yourselves?
じゃあ僕喋りますね。最初に話します。漫画家になるためのヒント。漫画家になったことがないんであれなんですけど、よく僕ら、日本でその漫画の専門学校とかにお邪魔して、この漫画家志望されてる若い人の前でお話しする機会があるんですけど、僕がよく話すのが、漫画家ってちょっとスポーツ選手みたいなところがあるなと思っていて、どういうことかっていうと、いろんな人がなりたい。でも誰でもなれるわけではないっていうことだったりとか、その中で第一線でバリバリやれる時期は多少限られてたりとか、あと、スポーツにいろんなポジションがあったりするように、漫画家にもじゃあこういういろんな題材があったりとか、で何を武器にするか、絵なのか物語なのかっていうところもいろんな戦い方があると思うんですね。だから自分に何が向いてるのか、どういうものが自分は得意なのかっていうことをまず見つけることが大事で、で、こっから先がスポーツ選手に一番近いってところなんですけど、とにかく練習をしなきゃいけないんですね。もう誰よりもたくさん書いて、誰よりも自分の課題みたいなのを見つけて、それをどんどん向上していくってことしか術がないと思うので、基本的には練習というか書くことのみだと思ってます。
ちょっと私からは少女漫画のちょっと視点でお話しすると、少女漫画っていうのはどちらかというと結構内面を描く、感情の内面を描くことが多いジャンルなので、親善さんとかの漫画を見るときは書きたい強い感情があるのか、そしてそれがオリジナルなものなのかみたいな部分をすごく重視して少女漫画の場合は見るかもしれないですね。あとはもう絵というか、とにかく可愛い絵が描けるのかという部分がすごく重要になってくるので、それはもう本当に練習あるのみなんじゃないかなと思います。
Now for Nate and Tiff, I know that it's a lot more difficult for people in the US to try to aspire to be a manga creator, and I know that they're US comic book creators. But this panel is called So You Want to Be a Manga Editor. and there's definitely an avenue, with you two who are manga editors in the United States. So, for somebody who is not only looking to become an editor, but specifically become a manga editor, do you have any tips or tricks on like how that's possible?
So there's a lot of different things that can go into being an editor, and it's different for every place. But I feel like, at least for my work and my path to getting here, which is what I can speak about, it's a lot about translation and thinking about your relationship as someone who is presenting Japanese culture and media to an English-speaking audience. All of the editors at Kodansha are working with the Japanese every single day to kind of fill those dual roles of making sure things are accurate and making sure things are accessible and authentic and sensitive. And that requires a lot of thinking about translation and what is the best way to mediate cultural difference and the best way to approach a lot of thorny problems every single day. We make like about 1,000 of these decisions every single day. So, it becomes quick. And so I guess one of the things I would say is, for folks who have a lot of opinions or feelings or different positions and positionalities with respect to the way that culture moves between East Asia and the US, that there's a lot of pathways into becoming a manga editor through this path. Obviously, for folks at Kodansha, having Japanese language skills is really important, which is sometimes a difficult thing to come by. It's not a cheap plane ticket. Not everyone has the opportunity to study abroad and all that other stuff. But sometimes there's classes in different places, and there's other ways to work on it. But I know it's sort of an important part of it. But I guess, you don't have to be also a super fan to be a manga editor as well. I think I had read about 2 manga before I started working here, Saint Young Men and Akira. But I cared a lot. I had been in academia, and what I was doing was writing about the way that Japanese literature, philosophy, and religion were being translated into English. And so, I kind of saw this as a really interesting opportunity to keep thinking about that and stand at that threshold and think about the most ethical, sensitive, but also accessible way to kind of continue doing what I had been doing, which is trying to think about this interchange of media and culture and stuff like that, and to do it with stories and art as sort of innovative and creative as the stuff that is coming through Kodansha and coming across our desks. And so I guess, one thing I could say is, if you have feelings or different positions or different experiences with the way that you interact with manga or Japanese culture, that that this is also a great place to keep thinking about that and have conversations about that and affect the way that conversation is happening. I think that's sort of at least how I'm coming at it.
Your thoughts?
Nate, I love when we get to have these kinds of conversations, because I think you and I are 2 really good examples of how you can come from 2 completely different backgrounds and still kind of find your way to manga.
Sure.
So to kind of foil Nate, I grew up as a manga super fan. 2 of the first manga series that I started reading manga 20 years ago, and 2 of the first series I ever read were actually Cardcaptor Sakura and Chobits, both of which were Kodansha manga. So it is really funny and serendipity how I am now editing Kodansha manga now as an adult. And basically my interest in manga led me to want to pursue a higher education in learning Japanese. But I remember when I graduated college, I didn't know at the time that was possible. But it was kind of funny because I remember my first few jobs out of college, actually, I got them because I knew Japanese. So I was either working at a language facility where I was dealing with Japanese students, or I was working at a Japanese company where I could use my Japanese skills to also edit materials, but also primarily because I knew Japanese. And that kind of allowed me to think, maybe this isn't just a hobby, maybe this is something that I could make part of my career. Because at the time, I wanted to work in publishing, I wanted to be an editor. And at the time I wasn't having much luck. That was also several years ago where a lot of the point of entry to working in publishing was through unpaid internships, which are thankfully no longer a thing now. But it was a little bit different and more difficult back then. So that really allowed me to kind of think and allow me to look at Japanese language learning a little bit differently, and allowed me to think, oh, maybe I can combine this with my passion for books and stories and wanting to be an editor. And through that, I found basically the Japanese literary translation community. So that's how I got into Japanese literature, wanting to translate Japanese literature. And because my passion and my love for manga stayed with me that whole time, that kind of allowed me to eventually enter the manga industry as a manga editor. And for me, that is just something I feel like I'm always going to have with me because as Nate mentioned, just as, looking at it as translation, what's the best way to bring this culture, this material over? I love being able to just read manga and think of, wow, this is really great. People really need to read this. Who is the story for? This audience is out there, how can we get this to them? So I love, still being able to work on manga in a professional capacity, but also still getting to be, as you said it, Nate, a super fan.
Tiff, that's an amazing answer. And I'm glad to see that there's also an avenue for folks who are just fans of manga and anime to really, be able to be a part of this industry. I know that it's a dream for me to be able to work in manga. So it is possible, everybody. But I hope everybody has learned a little bit something in terms about how manga is made in Japan, how it comes over to the US, how it's possible to be a part of this industry that so many people are just really big fans of. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists for their amazing information and insight. Tsuchiya-san, Takuma-san, Nate, Tiff, thank you so much for joining us on this panel. And everybody, if you'd like to learn more about Kodansha manga, both in Japan and in the States, please visit us at Kodansha.us. It is our spiffy new site that has a lot of stuff on not only manga, but also books. So please check us out. And again, thank you so much again to all of our panelists for your time and for your knowledge.